We're continuing our discussion here on Morning Live, and our guest this morning is Lumkile Mondi. He's a political economist as well as a political analyst. So it's great to have him here talking to us about particularly issues that arose out of the Statistician General's report into poverty here in South Africa. And we've been talking about education. I just want to try and wrap up the education because there is so much to get through. Skills shortage. So we're living in a country where, you know, we try and emphasize education, and yet there are people that have studied. We've got students out there that are desperate for jobs, but they can't find the jobs even though they have the education. There's that double-edged sword that we're talking about. At the same time, and I'm bringing into the conversation, is the issue of skills, is that we lack so many skills in this country, and we have to get it from elsewhere, and industries die because we don't have the skills. How do we get this balance, and what do we need to do?
Well, I mean, critically, we call it the National System of Innovation, which is a technical term, where you talk about the cradle to grave, where when you are born as a child, we prepare you from 0 up to 18 to the labor market. So from 0 you start early learning, you go to grade R, primary, etc. And then by the time you finish, we want to in the labor market. So there's a linkage in that national system of skills formation. In South Africa, what we have not done, or what we dropped, was that link, where there is a crack. There is a crack in the sense that the linkage between from cradle to grave fell apart. It fell apart because of our education policy, because education and manpower, as you call it, ladies will forgive me, are intertwined, because you need to ensure that your education as well as your labor market are linked. So your employers, as in academia, are intertwined in training. So what we did was that we got rid of vocational training as just as a by-side, and employers are not integrated into that system. So whatever we produce, we just produce highly skilled people in what they can do. However, they're not linked to what's happening in the labor market. So what we need to do, we either adopt a German model. In the German model, the employers are very close to us as varsities. So we train for employers. So they give us feedback at universities, at other TFTs and TVETs, etc. So that linkage is there.
So they'll tell us what
they
are
need,
needed,
and then we train.
And then you're almost guaranteed a job.
We train accordingly. So that system we need to change. Under apartheid, it was there. Remember, under apartheid, we had all these training institutions where the parastatals themselves provided a lot of that support, as well as labor centers, where when you finish school, you go to labor center. Similarly, at the labor center, the employer will go there to say, look, I know I need these few people, and then there will be linkages between the demand and supply. So we need to look at those methodologies and see whether did we adopt the neoliberal approach completely by giving everyone a freedom. That is, as a labor or employment searcher, you're on your own, and on the employment side, you also on your own. You have to look for that. Let's create again that system where there is a linkage from cradle to grave. When you graduate, we know where you're gonna go. Similarly, when the employer, we were going towards the 4th industrial revolution, the employer gives that feedback to education so that both are talking to one another. And then we can address that problem.
All right, well, there's one solution put on the table for you. Now, I'm going to move away from education, although we could speak about this the entire interview. And I want to talk about grants, because the amount of, we've seen the figures just jump. Again, I think we've got 17, 18 million people dependent on grants at the moment. But we look at this issue, and admittedly it puts food on the table, and it does assist people that do not have work, that for whichever reason it is that they are receiving grants. Now, there's also talk of an income grant. Isn't this what destroys an economy? Isn't this where we're becoming a nanny state, where everybody is just dependent on the grants and not work?
Well, critically, remember, the grant must be a function of a growing economy. So to an extent that we have got high levels of inequality, high levels of poverty, as we've discussed this morning, if there is a growing economy, we can never leave the rest of our people behind, because that just widens our inequality. So I support a creation of a basic income grant for everyone. However, that should be backed up by a strategy of growing the cake, whereby there is policy certainty in all sectors of economy, so that business is incentivized to create jobs, to create wealth for itself, which you can tax to redistribute it as a form of a basic income grant. So our debate in South Africa, particularly by policymakers, is that we want to increase the social wage, but we want to destroy the wealth creating capability. We have got Mining Charter 3, which has destroyed jobs. Just that's this week. We lost about 15,000 jobs. We're talking about white monopoly capital. These are our partners. Critically, we saw on Wednesday that the business leader in South Africa has come forward with a social contract. You'll expect government to link that, because for us to come with a basic income grant, which will then ensure that our people have got food on the table, whilst we address the problem of growth as partners, as well as creating employment. That plan will ensure that over time, as our economy grows at 6%, as we've discussed in our plan, National Development Plan, that at that point you can start reducing those grants that are giving. Yeah. But ours is the other way around. We have focus on giving, but very little focus on growth. And therefore, we are going to have serious problems going forward, because we may not be able to afford them if the economy is not growing.
Yeah. All right. Very quickly, I've got to put in a whole bunch of questions into one.
Sure.
So I'm going to talk to you about what the Archbishop mentioned yesterday, Archbishop Ndungane, and he was very scathing yesterday, speaking about the shame that our government should be feeling right now after we saw reports such as Statistics South Africa released. The Bishop cited the potential of a nuclear deal that could put us in a worse situation than before.
Sure.
That if this goes ahead, we're in huge trouble. And the corruption that is sitting at government level.
Yes.
Talk to me about this. I mean, because I know that you keep emphasizing the lack of leadership. It's the leadership, it's the leadership. But with all of this sitting on the table, you know, if we don't fix things, where are we going as a country? Well,
firstly, remember that if a sitting president who lied under oath, our constitutional mandate. Secondly, the continuous supporting him in parliament, where we've seen the continuous of erosion of basic rights. And therefore, the lack of accountability on how money is being used. We've worked, my colleagues and many others have worked on a report, including the churches, that our state has been repurposed and billions of rands have leaked out of the system. So the Bishop is spot on that if this trend continues, really the poverty that we've seen and the pathologies that result because of the poverty, such as crime and the violence against women, and all the marginalization of real black people, is going to continue under a democratic government whose constitutional mandate was to ensure that we've got a growing economy, we redress and ensure that our people come to the midst of the economy. So yes, he's right that the nuclear deal and the support of SOEs is going to continue worsening the position of African people, which this government is supposed to focus on them, given the legacy of apartheid and the continuous marginalization by the apartheid regime, which this government has continued and has done very little to redress, because it's focused on those that are in power and the political party that's ruling us at the moment.
All right, we've got to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program and giving us your views. Lumkile Mondi, he is an economist as well as a political analyst, talking to us about Stats SA's latest figures and showing how South Africa is truly struggling with over half the population now declared poor. Let's take a look at our news bulletin now. It is 7 o'clock here on the program. Palesa's got our details.